I never imagined I'd be the kind of parent who could destroy her child. I never imagined I'd be the kind of person who, by choosing the safe thing in a single, frantic moment, could unmake a life. But I did it. I made a choice in smoke and panic, and for 10 years I watched the wreckage of that choice grow until it swallowed everything I loved. This is the story of the night the house burned, what came after, and what it cost me, what it still costs me, as I sit now with a hospital bracelet on my wrist and the steady beep of machines marking out the seconds I have left with my daughter. I'm writing because I need someone outside of these four walls to know that sometimes we make monsters of our children and then we are surprised when the world treats them like monsters. I'm writing because maybe, if I put it down in words, it will be less heavy, because maybe guilt needs the air. I was 36 when the fire happened. My husband, Tom, was 37. We had 2 children then, Daniel, who was 17, and Emily, who was 10. Daniel was the kind of child who lived inside his head. He loved computers, he loved the hum of things that could be taken apart and reassembled. He read novels that smelled like other people's lives. He was quiet, yes, but he was reliable in ways that didn't make noise. He'd make breakfast when he thought I was asleep, he'd sit with Emily when I worked late, he'd fix the backyard gate so it didn't slam in the wind. He was not loud, but he was present. Emily was the opposite. She was sunshine that yanked everyone's attention like a magnet. She danced when she walked, she laughed before jokes had finishing lines, she had that small fierce generosity of children who believe the world is mostly kind. She and Daniel bickered, the usual sibling stuff, but I always thought they loved each other. I trusted that as parents we knew our children. It was a winter night, the kind where the cold makes your bones lean toward the heater and you forget about the dryer humming at the end of the house. I woke up from coughing. There was a plastic metallic smell in the air, a sting under my eyelids. I yanked open my bedroom door and the hallway was red with light. Tom was already awake, but the living room was a wall of flame where our family photos used to hang, and the smoke was moving so fast it looked like a living thing. Tom grabbed Emily and I called for Daniel. He wasn't in his room. He wasn't anywhere on the first floor. We made it outside. Our neighbors were on the lawn in their pajamas, their faces lit by the fire like lanterns. For a terrible, frozen second I thought maybe he'd gotten out and was safe. Then I saw Tom run back. He came out with Emily in his arms, her face blackened, her small body limp. They put her in the ambulance and sirens shredded the night. I remember a police officer's calm voice when he said, "We need to speak to your family." Calm is the last voice you want in those moments, it makes your bones colder. In the hospital hallway a detective told us they'd found evidence of accelerants in the garage. The garage was Daniel's place. It was where he kept his broken radios and his soldering tools, the place where he fixed our old toaster. They said they'd found a pattern of deliberate ignition. I remember staring at my son's profile, his hair smelled of smoke, his lips were cut from breathing in ash, and the detective's words bent into a terrible hypothesis in my head, teenage rage, a fight that went too far. "Did you do it?" Tom asked, automatic and violent. He always got like that when he was scared, he became a machine that needed an answer. Daniel's face crumpled, he stammered, "No, I woke up to the smoke, like you. I didn't, I should have listened, I should have kept my hands off him." Instead, I heard Emily under the blankets on a hospital bed, breathing like a fragile animal, and I was small with fear, and the world narrowed until the only thing I could hold was the image of my child with third-degree burns. Evidence is a thing that looks like fact, and we all chose the easier fact. We kicked him out, we changed the locks, we told him, with more heat than words, that he was no longer welcome. My husband screamed that he was dead to us. We posted bail on our certainty, this was how you protect your child. We told ourselves that the family unit required root pruning for the health of the rest. When you're panicked, you prune. The years afterward were slow poisoning. Emily survived, barely. She would live, they said, but with scars and with the long-term shadow of trauma. Skin grafts lined her arms like a map of flame. She would sleep with a nightlight for months. She would wake from nightmares and push my hand away because sometimes she dreamed of an older boy's silhouette at the doorway, the boy she used to call brother. As for Daniel, he was gone. He was 18 that year, a boy on the verge, and we turned him into an exile. I remember the night his duffel bag was on the porch and he begged, knees folded in the damp mulch, for us to let him explain. He begged and I did not move. I held Emily's hand and watched him leave because in our small house there was a slot into which fear fit neatly and the rest of my heart shrank from it. The police said they'd done their job, we said ours. I told myself I had kept my daughter alive. I told myself the rest was collateral. 10 years passed and in those 10 years we lived inside the armor of our decision. People nodded like it was a closed wound. The extended family muttered, but they told us we were brave. We got busy. Tom threw himself into work. Emily grew quiet in a way that made me grateful. She was alive, she was here, she was safe. I would sleep, sometimes. Mostly I slept with one eye open, with a phantom of Daniel's face reflected in every mirror. Then the kidneys started failing. At first it was small, the sort of thing doctors catch with routine blood tests and you fix with vitamin regimens. Then it got worse. She started swelling. She was tired. They ran tests and there it was, the verdict, progressive renal failure. They told us to prepare for the possibility of a transplant. Tom and I got tested, neither of us matched. We went to cousins, to second cousins, the family trees became a ledger of ruin. Nothing fit. Someone on the transplant team mentioned siblings. A brother is often the best match. It was a sentence that landed like a small grenade in a room we had thought quiet. Tom's hands went cold. I felt the air leave the room. There are moments when memory becomes a physical object you can pick up, and in that instant I could hold the memory of Daniel in my hands, the duffel bag on the porch, the pleading, the eyes that had loved our daughter. I had not allowed him inside my home again. I had not allowed myself to speak his name. We didn't want to face him. It was easier to pretend there was no such possibility. But you can bury the past physically, and you can't bury it biologically. I started to look. Finding him after 10 years was less heroic than it sounds. It was awkward messages, a mutual friend, a phone number that had been disconnected and then reactivated, and then a terse reply, "Where?" I don't know why he agreed to meet me. Maybe he wanted to see the face that had watched him crawl away. Maybe he expected to be spat on. Maybe he was curious. I was prepared for the worst, for a fist across my cheek or for a polite refusal. Preparation is expensive, it doesn't buy peace. He sat across from me at a damp, small coffee shop and the thing that shut me down first was not how he looked, worn, lean, eyes like coin scratches, but the way he didn't move when he saw me. He did not come undone. There was a steadiness to him that did not belong to a kid who'd been broken. He had the air of someone who'd learned to carry silence like armor. "What do you want?" His voice was a low instrument, measured. I told him. I fumbled words like a person with no practice. "Emily, she needs a transplant. You might be a match." The doctor said. That last sentence was a lie and the lie tasted bitter. We had done tests and they'd found he had the right blood type, but there were no guarantees. I wanted the miracle. I wanted the gap to be filled. He listened. He watched my face while I spoke, then he put the cup down and said very calmly, "You drove me out." There are some sentences that aren't just statements, they are mortar. They stop things from moving. I apologized. I cried. I tried to reconstruct a decade in 5 minutes. I told him about hospital rooms and grafts, about how she sometimes wakes and calls for him in a voice that is a matchbox of grief. I told him I understood if he couldn't forgive us. I told him we were not asking him to forgive, we only hoped he could help save her life. I told him we didn't expect repair in exchange for blood. He watched me, and then he told me what the years had been like. He told me about the first night he slept on a railway underpass because he'd been refused entry when he tried to stay with an aunt. He told me he'd washed his clothes in public restrooms. He told me about being refused rent because someone had whispered a rumor. He told me about the scholarship he'd had to leave because the school couldn't stand the scandal. He told me about the nights he'd looked at the ceiling and thought about taking too many pills because the noise in his head was louder than the living. He told me about people spitting on him even when it was pouring rain. He said, "I loved her." He said, "I carried her to school when she had the flu once. I made her pancakes when you were late." He said those things quietly, like a person reciting a list of small, private crimes. "But you didn't try to see me. You turned your back." That was the thing I couldn't deny. We had chosen, in the heat of fear and evidence and police wording, to believe the easiest narrative. We had not let doubt in. And if doubt had been a door, we had slammed it. He didn't say yes. He didn't say no. He sat up, collected his bag, and for a few seconds there was a human wildness in his face that I had never seen since he was a child. He said one sentence I thought would split the world: "I will not be the instrument of your family's forgiveness." He left. For 3 days I lived on that refusal. I tried calling. I tried sending messages that would not seem like begging. The transplant team told me not to harass him, that coercion invalidates consent and that the law takes consent very seriously. The law is a clean instrument, life is not. I tried to buy his forgiveness with penitent messages, with the kind of desperate honesty that felt obscene to send. I told him how I had dreamed of him across the decade, how I had imagined him folding himself into a life where he was never hurt again, and how I could never take back what we'd done. He read the messages and didn't reply. Then something terrible and stupid happened. I made a post. It was an act of panic and also of stupidity. I posted a photograph of Emily in the ICU, tubes, an oxygen mask, the way her cheeks were drawn. I wrote openly about the need for a donor, about how we had found a promising match, and I tagged him by name because I thought, foolishly, that the social pressure of everyone knowing might be leverage. I wanted leverage because leverage is the one thing we are taught in a crisis if we are not taught empathy. I tell you this not because I am proud, God, I am not, but because I need you to know the shape of the desperate, stupid things people do when time is a knife. The post went like a fire. It spread in the way small cruel things spread online, first friends, then acquaintances, then strangers. Comments accelerated from sympathy to judgment in a matter of hours. The chorus that rose was merciless. Why would he not save his sister? How could anyone refuse? A kidney is a kidney, people wrote, you can live with one. The chorus made anything complex into a blunt instrument, he must be a monster. And in that chorus I recognized something even more fearful than my son's refusal, the shape of public accusation that once had been pointed at him. People reviled Daniel with the same quick certainty that had destroyed him. He posted a video late that night, a 5-minute thing, shaky, with his hands like small maps of his life, and he said things I could not unhear. He described, calmly and without pornographic melodrama, the decade after the door had slammed. He talked about sleeping in libraries, about being kicked out of youth shelters, about the nights he wished for oblivion. He showed a document, notes from a counselor he had seen that included phrases like, suicidal ideation, and, malnutrition. He had records, he had proof of a slow erasure. Then he said words that should have felled me, I will not be the savior of the people who buried me alive when I was still breathing. The video went viral, people lined up on both sides. Some defended him, some said that forgiveness cannot be purchased by an organ, others screamed that his refusal was monstrous. The comments landed like stones. The public had a cruelty that was not surprised by cruelty, it fitted into neat moral categories and stoned whoever fell between them. Emily watched the video, she watched it on a phone propped on a hospital bedside table, eyes half closed, hearing but maybe not understanding. Later she asked me, in that small worried way children retain, Mom, is he going to save me? I wanted to fold the world around her and protect the small child who still trusted people, but the truth of the video was a knife. She had seen him accuse us back, and there was something like alienation in her face when she realized the way the rest of the world now saw her. I should have stopped with the online post. I should have swallowed my shame whole and gone alone to plead at his feet if I had to. But shame makes people do ugly, public things. The comments turned on me with an astonished speed. People who'd once comforted fled. Calls came in. Relatives said things I will not repeat. Our private grief became an entertainment. Daniel posted again. This one was more composed. He sat in a room with a pale wall and he read from a stack of papers. He talked about the cost of rumor. He talked about identity. How hard it is to rent a room when the landlord has seen your name next to the word, abuser. How it is nearly impossible to get a job when your references say you are a danger. He said he loved Emily, that he had always loved her, and that he would never wish her death, but that he could not be the instrument of the family's absolution. He said that he had survived by deciding to live on his own terms, to not be indebted to the people who had buried him alive. I won't be used, he said, and that was that. Tom's rage returned with the skittering of something feral. He wanted to force the issue into privacy courts, to criminalize refusal, a stupid, ugly line that had more to do with his inability to process grief than anything else. I stopped him. The transplant team told us again, the ethics board would not allow coercion. Consent must be given freely. The law was a cold thing, it had no answers for fires. Emily's numbers dropped. The days got thin. The thing about 10 years is that it gives you practice in not seeing someone. You can build a life around the absence of a person and ask nothing of your conscience. 10 years also gives a person time to harden, or to become something else entirely. Daniel had become someone who knew how little the world would give him, and as a result he kept something fiercely held inside him, a right to choose. Finally, the day came when he answered the phone. It was not a yes. It was not an invitation. It was a meeting at a church parking lot. I went anyway, with Tom, with my throat a constant dryness, with a rawness in my ribs where shame sat. We walked up and there he stood, older, taller in some ways, not unscarred. He had a girlfriend at his side. He introduced her as someone practical and two things became clearest in that moment, that he had made a life without us and that it had not been easy. He carried himself like a man who had learned to keep unpleasant things inside. "What do you want?" he asked. It was not a plea now, it was a statement of fact. "We need you," Tom said, the old sharpness in his voice returning. "You can save her." He considered. Then he surprised me and did something I had not imagined. He said he would get tested. It was a small, impossible mercy. I thought, foolishly, that we were on the road to some small redemption, that perhaps hands could be mended with blood and the surgeon's incision would stitch together more than flesh. He went to the hospital. Blood was drawn and I sat alone in a plastic chair and tried not to look at the nurse who kept glancing my way like a woman who might deliver news in a small, terrible parcel. The test had a rhythm to it, a waiting that felt like the quiet before a thunderclap. 2 days later the transplant coordinator called. The voice on the phone was professional but soft. There was a pause. "He is not a match," she said. It felt like the oxygen leaving me. It could be cold science, an unlucky combination of antigens, but when I looked at Tom his face had a new layer of cruelty. "So he refused," he said, and the sentence was an accusation that had nothing to do with antigenic material. That night I cried until I could not breathe. I told myself that the body does not know revenge and that the body's chemistry is not morality, but the feeling of being mocked by biology was ugly. Then there came a call that changed everything, because the universe often does not care for our moral convenience. 2 days later the coordinator called again. There had been an error, they mixed samples, they said. "It happens," they said. In small words. In human words, it felt like a blade. He was a match. I sat in my car after the call and screamed, a sound that might still be in the parking lot's fabric. It was a raw, animal sound. I don't know if it was relief, or terror, or the knowledge that we were a breath away from demanding a miracle from a man we had abandoned. Tom wanted to call Daniel. I wanted to call Daniel. I wanted to fall at his feet and make promises I would never be able to keep. But we had ignited so much. There was a different silence between us now, like two people who had hurled things through a window and neither could reconstruct the glass. We sent him a message. The message had a softness to it, but the internet is not a soft place. It said we would not coerce him. It said that if he chose to help, we would be grateful beyond language. If he chose not to, we would, God, we had no right, to ask. He replied with a single line, "I have been tested. I know what it means to be erased. I won't be used as your Deus ex machina." He did not show up at the hospital that week. The surgical team tried to find alternatives but the waiting list was long. Emily's condition deteriorated in a way that is not cinematic but is instead a slow arithmetic of numbers moving against you. Her oxygen saturation faltered. She stopped eating. She would drift in and out of sleep where the dream spaces had flaming edges and the phantom of a boy at the doorway. There were moments when she called for him by name, knees of a child pushing to the surface. I tried to answer those calls as if my voice could be a lifeline. The last week is a fog. I am sorry to be so blunt. There are things that smell permanently of bleach and wires now. There are visits from people who look like doctors and there are curtains and shared grief. Tom talks less. He sleeps with his face in his hands. Sometimes he sits on the edge of Emily's bed and stares at the monitor with a blankness like someone observing snowfall on a cold day. He looks but does not see. Daniel texted one last time 4 days before the end. He wrote, "I said I won't be your instrument. I meant it, but I also mean this. I am not a monster. I won't watch her die if I can stop it." The sentence split everything like a scalpel. It felt, at first reading, like the thing I had prayed for. Maybe it was the thing I deserved. But then he wrote again, "I will go to the hospital, but not for you. I will go because I cannot stand the weight of someone's death on my conscience, and because I loved her, once." He said he would not forgive us. He said he would not be a pawn. But he said he would not watch her die if he could stop it. It was a complicated mercy that did not bend to our needs for apology. He came to the hospital the next morning. He walked in like a man returning to a land that had once been his and was not. He was thinner. His hands shook. He did not look at me. He walked to Emily's bed and looked at her with a kind of tenderness that belonged to secret files we parents sometimes don't see. He had loved her in the small invisible ways you only know if you were there to fold her pajamas. He smiled, the tiniest thing, and put a cold hand on her forehead. He consented. The surgery was scheduled. Surgeons shuffled. Nurses whispered. Tom held onto the edge of the curtain and we prayed in short, ugly phrases while the anesthesia breathed down hallways. I wrote the things I never said into the side of my thumbnail. "I am sorry," I told an empty room until the words felt slashed and thin. 2 days after the operation the surgeon came to speak to us. He had that bureaucratic softness in his voice. "There were complications." That is a sentence that you hope in your chest is only a formality. He said the kidney had taken, but Emily had developed an infection, sepsis, that had moved fast, like a living thing that had found a ladder into a body that used to be new. They did everything. They did blood washes, antibiotic cocktails that tasted like copper, they threaded the IV lines like small ropes. They made a valiant stand. The night she died, her breath left like a small bell. The monitors were loud and then quiet. There was a last whisper of a machine and then a quasi-human silence, the kind of silence that asks questions and does not know the words. Tom screamed once, a single, animal sound, and then he folded in on himself like someone hollowing out a log. He fell into a chair and did not move. I put my head on the bedsheet and thought of ways to unmake the past, but there are no ways to unmake decisions. There are only ways to live with them. In the days after, people called with condolences and with knives. There was a funeral that was too small for the gravity of it. Daniel was there. He stood on the fringes. He did not carry Emily. He sat in the third pew and he stared at the wood, and when I found him later, in the cemetery with dirt under my nails and my voice like gravel, he said, "I saved her. I did what I could." He did not say "I forgave you." He did not say anything about the decade. He said, "I did what I could." That sentence is a kind of world. It is both generous and cruel. It is a thing that recognizes limits and gives no absolution. People have hated me on the internet since that week. They have called me a monster who would let my child die to punish another. They have said I deserved the emptiness I live inside now. It is true that I deserve a lot of the things I am told, but in rage it is easy to become cruel, in grief it is easy to lose the measure of pain. My husband says it was my posting that made everything worse. He says if I hadn't done that, maybe he would have come willingly. My mother says it was the detective's report that stole my mind. I answer them all with small breaths. Because words are inadequate. In the end, what I have is this: a hole in my chest where the idea of my family used to live, a son who saved his sister but won't be a son to us, and the knowledge that our choice in a single panicked hour set off a chain reaction that ruined the arcs of 3 lives. There are nights when I dream Daniel on the front steps, hair wet with the rain, and in those dreams I can still open the door. I can still reach for the boy I shut out and carry him back in. Waking is worse. Waking is messy with the way deeds live on. I do not know what will come of any of this. I do not know whether Daniel will ever speak to me with more softness than distance. I do not know whether I will live a long life intent on penance. I know only that I would give anything to have the decision back in my hands, to be less cowardly, to have sat with doubt instead of throwing it away. I learned, at last, that choosing the easy fear is a form of violence. If you are reading this and you are a parent, please, listen. When a child is accused, it is easy to clap the shutters shut. It is easier to pick a side and wallow in the righteousness of that side. But children are fragile in a way adults often measure by attention, not by consequence. There are lives that hinge on what we do in the first breath after a charge is made. Sometimes the kindest acts are the ones that require patience, the ones that demand investigation, care, and above all the possibility of doubt. Silence can be guilt's partner. Silence can be cruelty. If there is any mercy left in my life, it is the fact that Daniel saved his sister despite everything. He did not forgive us publicly. He did not take us back. He saved her like a person who still had a heart but would not hand it over. That is not for me to judge. It is only for me to say thank you in a language he might never hear. I will carry the rest. I will carry the knowledge of where I failed. I will carry the memory of a quiet boy who fixed toasters and made pancakes and loved his sister in ways I didn't see. I will carry Emily's laugh like a tiny bird inside me until it dies, because the part of me that is left needs something that is not the shape of blame. I am sorry. I don't know if that is enough. I don't know if it will ever be enough. But I will say the words until my voice is empty. I am sorry, Daniel. I am sorry I believed the simplest story. I am sorry I did not hear you. I am sorry I let fear make my choice. If you think there is a moral to this, maybe it is this: do not let fear lead your hands. Do not assume that the noise of evidence is always the music of truth. Listen to your children. Listen to the quiet ones. When in doubt, do not exile them. And if you have exiled someone, go find them before the years harden everything beyond repair.